I am pleased to introduce to you Ali Velshi. Ali is someone whom all of you know. He was years with CNN, Emmy nominated, took the leap to Al Jazeera as Al Jazeera was coming to the United States to expand its franchise here. So he is an entrepreneurial person within his context. And Ali is going to provide us with guidance through the next segment, which is the entrepreneur. Ali Velshi.
Thanks, Robert. Thank you. Thank you, Robert, for having me here. I'm happy to serve you whenever I can, if you'd be kind enough not to put me after Craig Kilberger next time. Because in some circles, I'm considered a good speaker. Craig and I are from the same town. I was actually a youngish reporter when Craig was making quite a stir in Canada. What he didn't tell you, by the way, is this whole penny stunt that he was talking about has caused Canada to ban the penny. After that remarkable performance we saw prior to Craig with the instruments, we've decided that this panel that we're going to do, we're just going to hum. And I'll be the one that keeps everybody up to tempo. Thank you for saying, Robert, that I'm a bit of an entrepreneur. I wish that were true, and in a room like this, it seems so untrue. But when I did leave CNN almost 2 years ago to the day, after a dozen years there, it felt weird. I mean, I had never until then held a job for about 2 years at a time, and all of a sudden I was leaving this place where I had developed my career, and I loved it, and it was so comfortable. And I was leaving for a company that, while not really a startup in the traditional sense, was new to the scene, a risk, a little bit different. And I was going to get into this uncomfortable place. And I felt uncomfortable about it for some time as I was deciding. And I thought to myself, this is ridiculous. I'm a business journalist. All I talk about is entrepreneurship and people who take risks and people who really, face not succeeding in order to move something forward, their idea or their passion, and I'm feeling uncomfortable about leaving one paid job for another. And I thought about that, and I thought, if I can't do this, then I've been lying to my viewers all of these years. And with that, I did it. Very pleased to have made that decision. I thank CNN for everything they did for me in my career, and I still miss it. But it was interesting to get into a thing, and if any of you have been reading the papers, we have some entrepreneurial sticking points at Al Jazeera that we're working through at the moment. But that's okay. That's okay. I came from a place at CNN, we had some fancy digs. We don't have those now. And if you needed to move a desk a few inches, there were several departments and a lot of paper you had to go through. Now I'm in a place where we didn't have desks. But that's okay. It is kind of interesting, though, that I'm here talking about entrepreneurship, since I'm actually part of a mature industry. To have somebody in cable news in a discussion about entrepreneurship is interesting only because we talk about shifts in our industry and the way in which we are going to keep more people watching us by paying for cable in a way that is somewhat reminiscent of what the discussion must have been on the Titanic as they were rearranging the deck chairs. We are definitely toward like I said, we're in a mature industry. Anybody who thinks that my industry is going to exist the way it does in 5 or 10 years is deluding themselves. We have a structure where we pay certain amounts of money for the production of content that is distributed a particular way. It's been that way for over a quarter century, longer in some parts of the United States, and that's just changing. And there's a generation of people out here for whom that doesn't even, they don't even understand that, and the history doesn't matter to them. There's a new way of doing things, and that's the beauty of this gathering, in that we are not looking at new ways to rearrange things. We are dealing with people, and my panel will have people who didn't know there was a box to work inside of. They've created entirely new ways of thinking about problems. I wasn't that person. I live vicariously through so many of you. When people tell me their ideas, you'll notice in the last day or so, as people have been telling me things, if you were one of them telling me about what you're doing, you're wondering why I'm staring at you like you have 3 heads, because it's hard to comprehend. When you don't have the heart and the soul and the mind of an entrepreneur, I live in great admiration of what so many of you do. But it's remarkable for me to hear the stories of how somebody left a job or started something new or took their life savings because they just thought there was a better way, and nobody else had done it. I just came from the X Prize annual Visioneering in Los Angeles a few weeks ago. I'm on the board there, and in December we had gone to launch X Prize India for the first time, which struck some of us as a little odd. Why would you need to have entrepreneurial type competitions in India? Well, you do, because these bright minds who we see here in America from India, particularly when they're young and inexperienced and not part of a major corporation, have trouble convincing people, decision makers in business in India, that there's a better way to do things. Because the structure in many places like India says, I can't really take your guidance on this if you haven't grown up in this company. I certainly can't take your guidance on it if you haven't grown up in this industry. And if you've actually done nothing, there's no particular value you can bring me. And we are trying to change that way of thinking as we have done here in the United States, in other places, to say we all have these resources in every culture, of every color, at every age, and every educational level. Let's stop ignoring it. Let's stop making it hard for those kinds of people. I want to introduce you to someone who will be on my panel, but I want him to talk to you a little bit. Slava Rubin is the co-founder and CEO of Indiegogo. I think, Robert, you said there, how many countries are here? 21 countries. I think my panel of 4 people, with the 5 of us, I think we have 21 countries. I'm not kidding. I mean, I was listening to these people. It takes 5 minutes. Where are you from? Oh, okay. How about you? Slava is from Belarus. Find that on a map. Slava did something we all do. Craig was just talking about fundraising, right? He's talking, that's every kid who wants to change the world, their instinct, or their parents' instinct, or their school's instinct is it get some money and change the world. And that does actually work in most cases. But we don't all have infrastructure for anything more than a few things we do. So we've got Craig and his group and others who find ways to leverage that little bit of power you have. Well, Slava has taken that to an entirely new level with Indiegogo. He has allowed people to raise money, and it was very personal for him, and he'll tell you this. It was very personal why he decided to do this and why he needed a methodology for raising money, but this idea of crowdsourcing in support of your idea, your invention, your cause, a charity, a family in need, he has now made accessible, he has democratized for all of us. After that, I'm going to have a great discussion with the members of my panel, but I want to start now by introducing you, ladies and gentlemen, to Slava Rubin. He's the co-founder and CEO of Indiegogo.
All right. You guys hear me? Hear me? Hear me? Yes? All right. So let's see if we're going to get some slides up there. No? Perfect. So I actually lived in Chicago from 2000 to 2003, so I'm really excited to be back. I was at the Hawks game last night, Game 6. Go Hawks. Yes, very exciting. Very exciting. Hopefully, if time allows, there'll be a Cubs game in my future. But I met Rob several years ago, and I've seen Kin grow quite a bit. And Rob asked me, hey, Slava, will you speak at Kin? You're going to give one of the talks. Okay. What would you like me to talk about, Rob? Just, you know, there's going to be some entrepreneurs. There'll be super senior folks from Fortune 500 companies. People will be flying in. Just make it interesting. Okay, so here we go. So we have 14 minutes left, and I'm going to give you 150 years in 14 minutes, which we're going to go back to the 1880s up to 2030. We're going to make some predictions for the future. All of this will be related to finance. I'll talk pretty fast because I don't have that much time, but I'm going to try to give you a lot of content. So in short, here's our journey. This is what we think of when we think of finance. This is a metaphor. This is an image, a symbol for waiting in line to ask somebody for permission. Mr. Banker, Mrs. Banker, can I have money? No. VC, can't, no. Government person, no. Boss, no. So you always have to ask somebody for permission, and they get to decide, right? Well, actually, it doesn't have to be that way. This is obviously from the days of the Depression, et cetera, but you can really think about this from any country. Think about it more like this, right? Which is, this is the Statue of Liberty. Why am I showing this in a funding presentation? Well, actually, the base of the Statue of Liberty was crowdfunded. The actual statue was free. But there was a guy named Joseph Pulitzer who was the leader of a paper called The New World. And we were not actually going to get the Statue of Liberty in America unless we got the money to be able to put it on the base. We had private investors for half of it. We had a gap of about $150,000. Joseph Pulitzer, using his technology at the time, watch this, newspaper, right? He sends it out frequency once every 2 weeks. His radius is about 100 miles. His distribution about 10,000 people. He's able to raise the $150,000 he needs. He gives nothing in return. No profit, no perks, no name on a stone, nothing. Just liberty. Will you be part of this? I'll give you money. Otherwise, we're not going to get the Statue of Liberty. People actually gave the money on average 88 cents. What's cool is not that he got 150 grand, right? What's cool, on average, 88 cents. So just think about that. That was 130 years ago. Fast forward, and then you get this. What is this? Well, the hives that you think about when you get honey, they come out of usually white boxes. That is technology that was patented in 1850. And you have to open it up, you get stung by the bees, you put on the white suit, you get the smoking machine, all that stuff. I know half of you probably do this, right? Right. But actually, wouldn't it be better if you didn't have to get stung by the bees? You didn't have to do it once a year. You didn't actually have to disturb the bees. Crazy. Well, actually, a couple folks in Australia have created that. They created technology, which is a cell structure, where the bees will go into the cell, fill it up with honey. You turn the crank, it opens the cell structure, the honey goes down through gravity, pools up at the bottom. You just open the tap, guys, the tap, right, like beer, and it goes down like honey right into your anything, cup. And then all of a sudden you close the cell, the bee comes back and said, I thought I already filled this up, but I'm going to fill it up again. You turn the crank, it opens the thing, honey goes down, you close it, you see how this goes, right? Now you can have fresh honey anytime. This is a good idea, right? Well, actually, they put it up on Indiegogo because nobody else actually believes in it. And what happens? Actually, they raised $12.5 million in 6 weeks. And how many countries do they fund it? This is the most from any platform anywhere in the world. 152 countries fund, not look. Every single country in the world looked at this project, every single one. 152 countries took money through their currency or whatever and funded it on Indiegogo. I mean, that's amazing. Distribution, the world. Frequency, anytime. Reach, the world, right? So it's just like fascinating. You could do it as much as you want. I mean, that's the speed, which is Joseph Pulitzer really figured it out. He just kind of sent me a message saying, hey, make it better. Okay, cool. So here's like the really fast version of history, and I'm not going to do this well, but I'm just going to give you really fast, which is before 1933, anybody could ask money for absolutely anything, and then a lot of grandmas got taken advantage of. Grandma says, hey, governor, I'm upset. Governor says, well, grandma's going to vote me out, so no more anybody asking anybody for money unless it's the SEC. They created the Securities Act in 1933, which means you can only get money if it's an IPO from the SEC. Otherwise, you have to be a rich person, an accredited investor, which means you have over $1 million in net worth or over $250,000 of salary. This is plus minus the same all around the world. So we'll fast forward, and then you get the 60s. You get big banks, right? And then all of a sudden, you start getting credit cards. Well, that's pretty cool. And then you started getting the first kind of solicitation, which is NPR, a radio business, which is really nonprofit. They're like, well, you give me some money so I can keep doing this. Pretty cool. Radio, we're not quite at the internet, right? We did newspaper back in the 1800s. And now we're starting to get into radio. So that's pretty cool. PayPal adds digital currency, so you can do it online. Friendster shows social networking, which obviously becomes MySpace, then Facebook, and these things all evolve. And then you get Indiegogo as an idea in 2007. Then you start getting President Obama's campaign. This is very local, obviously, with Chicago. But actually, President Obama was the first person to raise over $1 million online with sub-$100 contributions. And this really starts to become more mainstream for people to say, hey, we can actually get lots of individuals to pool money together to make one big chunk of money. And then you get Square and other devices, a lot more advancements. In 2012, you then get President Obama coming back, and he signs the Jobs Act, which is to try to allow for equity crowdfunding and lots of other interesting things to be able to happen in the funding space. As a matter of fact, one of our campaigners was on stage with President Obama. She's the one wearing a blue dress, but you can't exactly see her. And he says, the bank said no, but Indiegogo said yes, and we need more of that. Right? And now Reggae Plus, which is something that's going to come out in June, anybody who knows about equity crowdfunding, again, I'm not really giving it attention it deserves, but you could ask about it later. This is going to revolutionize all of how funding gets done. It's not quite Title III, and I know I'm jumping past what some people understand, but when Title III happens, hopefully in the next couple of years, it'll be really cool. Point is, this is only in 80 years, right? Imagine how this is all going to keep advancing. So then you have lots of Indiegogo projects, great. So in case you're wondering, we send money to 70 to 100 countries a week. Millions of dollars. We're the largest platform in the world every week. The world wants democratization of capital. So this is just how the industry has evolved. This is the entire finance industry that we see in terms of innovative, where it's heading. I'll stop there. Usually people take pictures, yes. You're probably like, oh yes, I was worried about those guys. So this is just broken down of the entire finance industry into different areas. You can say, is that finance or not? We'll talk about that later in a second. So here's what I like to call the loop, which is it's not a one-way conversation. It's not, can I have the money banker? No, you cannot. See, that's a simple transaction. This becomes much more of a relationship, right? You're getting an entire feedback loop of market validation. You know, that honey. No one wanted to say yes to them, but when they put it out on Indiegogo, the market is starting to say, we here in Spain love this. We here in Australia love this. We here in Israel love this. We here in America love this. We like the fact that the price point is $99 or $699. We start getting feedback right away, instantaneously. So that market validation is really powerful. Second, you get to test the marketing, right? I didn't play the video for you, but they changed the video a couple times. You know, do you want to show the product first? Do you want to show the founders first? How do you want to scale this out? You get more promotion than you ever could on your own, because now you're starting to have everybody to come together that all want to share. It's almost like a financial minga. Everybody just coming together. There you go. So, and what I think is the most powerful thing is you get to create relationship, which is, see, most organizations, you get disintermediated from the actual customer. See, if you're a filmmaker, AMC owns the customer. If you're a musician, Apple with iTunes owns the customer. If you're writing a book, Amazon owns the customer. See, transactions get commoditized, relationships become brands. So everybody wants to be in the D2C business, the direct-to-consumer business. No one wants to go through some other entity, but they have to because of the way it works. But you don't actually have to. The more things get democratized by these tools. And the internet is the ultimate democratization platform. So anytime that somebody says you have to go through this whatever, you don't. There's this thing called the internet. So what's next? Here's where we get into a little bit of the future. Again, we'll talk fast here, but I believe that small businesses are going to continue to evolve, and even bigger businesses are going to start getting into this space. So for example, Stone Brewery here, they have 1,000 employees. They're not some mom and pop. 1,000 employees, and they were trying to decide if they're going to open a brewery in Germany. They went onto Indiegogo, and the crowd said, yes, we want the first independent brewer to ever have a European brewer, first American independent brewer to ever have a brewery in Europe. Boom, $2.5 million. And I think that's going to continue. You're going to have the Best Buys. You're going to have the storefronts. They're always getting paid for buyers to make decisions. Those decisions are their opinions, their experience. I feel it, I don't feel it. You're just going to track the data. And you're going to say, that Flow Hive, that honey thing, I want that in my store. Because the data will show market validation. So this is how big companies will be starting to make their decisions. They'll outsource the R&D to these platforms, which is a segue here. I mean, we've already had Google, Philips, Honda, Domino's, all these different companies work with Indiegogo, not because we're seeking them out, because this is where the future is going. R&D budgets are always speculative. People want to figure out, where can I find this information? You create some sort of customer research forum, and you pay people $100 each to give you feedback. Don't pay anybody anything. Have it go up, and everybody will give you feedback by themselves, because they'll just show you they want this, or they don't. Individuals are completely disrupting nonprofits. I think you already saw Craig speak about this in a different manner. But on Indiegogo, you have this kid who's 12 years old, I believe as well. And there's the blogger, Brandon, who represents Honey, Humans of New York. Photographs him and said, who's your most inspiring person? He said, oh, my principal. And he was really shocked that it wasn't one of his parents and it wasn't his teacher. Your principal? She's like, yes, my principal, Miss Lopez, always makes me feel good. Even though we're in inner city Brooklyn, a really bad part of Brooklyn, you know, I always feel like I could do anything. He goes to speak to the principal. The principal says, yeah, I try to inspire these kids to believe they can do anything. Most don't ever go to high school. What can I do to help? Well, I'd like to all take them to Harvard because I want them to know that this is possible. So in 2 weeks, he helps raise them $1.5 million. $30,000 takes a class to Harvard. They're going to Harvard for decades. Which is cool because all those kids get to be inspired to say, I can actually maybe go here, which they never really would have thought of. Venture capitalists are now deciding on their pipeline based on Indiegogo. There's already hundreds of millions of dollars of VC money that has followed an Indiegogo campaign. Some of these campaigns, some of these investments are happening 3 weeks after the launch of the Indiegogo. They're like, oh, I need to get this right away. And in my opinion, the future holds where every bank will offer this as a financial product. Small businesses get turned down all the time because if you don't have revenues over 2 years, you can't actually get a loan in America. And if you have revenues over 2 years, most likely you're going to get rejected. Small business today becomes big business tomorrow. You would have said yes to them for a college loan, a home loan, a car loan, but you said no to them for a small business loan. They hate you forever. It's like the Mazda Miata concept. The reason you get a Mazda Miata is because later they're going to buy lots bigger cars. You lose them once, you lose them forever. Everybody's going to want to offer this product just the way credit cards, no one makes credit cards. Every bank offers credit cards. You want to cross-sell, upsell, you want to capture the data. This will be the new financial product of the future. And to me, the ultimate industry, the slowest industry is the government. They're all going D2C. Everybody's going direct to consumer. The film industry is going around, everybody's going around. Best Buy is going around. They're trying to find it, but they all mostly are through their hourglass shape of they make the decisions. So think about it. On the outside of that hourglass shape of decision maker is all this open space. But to me, the ultimate hourglass shape is the government, right? We choose people to represent us. They are our AMC theaters. They are our Best Buy. Why can't it just be direct to consumer? So to me, by 2030, we will have an escrow account from the government. So imagine you pay $100 in taxes. $25 of those taxes will be held in an escrow account. There will be people on the other side that will create city projects, state projects, country projects, world projects. And then you will use your escrowed account tax dollars and you will deploy them against any project you want, which means direct to consumer. You will be in full control of where your taxes go based on the projects that were already set up. Now, I know you think this is crazy, that's fine, but that's where it's going to head. It's the slowest industry, right? Film, music, newspaper goes first, then you get energy, medicine, and those types of things, finance. Government will be last, but that's where it will head. This is a perfect example. This is solar roadways. Solar roadways was turned down by all the institutions. It's exactly what it sounds like. Solar roadways, what does that mean? Well, we used to have analog phones, and now we have smartphones. Well, why is it every one of our roadways is an analog roadway? What a waste. Why can't they be smart roadways? Well, what does that mean? Imagine a digital layer on top which captures the sun, all the energy. Well, that's cool. And you put it all into the grid. Well, imagine that the cars on top of that it feels where the cars are, so if you're going to potentially crash, it can send a signal. So imagine there's potentially a deer in front of you. You're just getting a signal back that, oh, car, there's a thing on top. This is all just very Bluetoothy, very just RFID. This is not that hard. It just will take a lot of infrastructure in terms of actually be able to create it. Why is it that we have painted lines? Why can't the lines just adjust based on how much traffic or not there is so you can know where you go? Oh yeah, this all makes sense. See, actually, we have some of the funding already happen on Indiegogo, $2.5 million, and now governments are coming into the back behind it. This is actually how this will all evolve. So here are just some local examples right here in Chicago. You have Roger Ebert, the documentary about him that was actually on CNN. You have Lantern, which is super cool. It's a device that's about the size of a brick. It actually gets internet data straight from the satellites anywhere in the world, and they offer it completely for free. They raise like $650,000. You have Industrial Design School, and then you have the UMI, which is a super cool way of taking hardware and software to have a better connected home. They're the largest funded project in Chicago ever on any platform. They only have been open for a few weeks. They still have over 3 weeks left to go, and they're already at like $1.5 million. So I'm done, but I'll leave you with this. I'll leave you with this final slide. Why am I showing you a slide about 2 women with ice? Which is, in the beginning of the 1900s, was the beginning of ice creation, as opposed to taking ice from somewhere and bringing it, right? So ice creation started as a centralized factory where there was ice. People would come to the centralized factory, and they would take the ice. 20 years later, there was ice fleets, distribution. You had those boxes that got set up by stores in different places, and they would take horse and buggy or one of the new Model Ts, and they would take the ice from the centralized place and bring it to one of those new areas, right? So that way you didn't have to walk as far. And then 20 years later, there was a new concept called the refrigerator, okay? So what I'll tell you as fact is one of the companies that was in the top 20 in the first industry never made it into the top 20 of the second industry. One of the companies that was in the top 20 of the second industry never made it into the top 20 of the third industry. But we now have the luxury of the omniscient view 100 years later, and it's very obvious that getting ice from the centralized factory or getting a refrigerator all is the same purpose. So I ask you, what industry are you in? Thank you.
Slava, stay on the stage. Let's sit down. We're gonna have a conversation. Slava is the only one of my panelists whose name I can pronounce. But I want to, since you can all see your names, why don't you just come up to the stage? Let's have a look. Slava, don't sit next to me. You make me look overdressed. There you go. I hear there's a bald cat here. He can sit next to me. In fact, Fareed, have we got your name spelled the right way there?
The last name, there's a mistake.
Yeah, I thought so. It's a good chance when you have a name like that, it's going to be a mistake.
Yes.
It's just a risk you run. That was amazing. That was really good. Thank you. I actually have an app for ice. Let me ask you, this is these guys are fun. This is actually a really great panel. They are literally all from two places, or three. You are from Baku, Azerbaijan.
Yes, true.
Which is kind of like two places. You're from Belarus, but you live in
San Francisco.
San Francisco. Shireen, you live in LA, but you were born in Iran. And you, Anik, are, hold on, let me just remember this. You were born in Australia, grew up in Norman, Oklahoma, and live in New York. God, I mean, this is the world of entrepreneurship in front of you. Before I move on to the others, I want to ask you, Slava, something you didn't mention is your motivation for getting into this. As a young man, you went to raise money for cancer, is that right?
Right, so my two co-founders and I had a mutual frustration of trying to raise money using the internet. Eric was on the board of a theater company here in Chicago called The House. It's actually still doing really well if anybody's seen. Danae actually was an investment banker. She worked with different entrepreneurs and filmmakers to help them get money because she was looked at as the gatekeeper of all money. And my dad died of cancer when I was a kid, and for a long time, like any good Eastern European, I couldn't speak anything about it. And then finally, in 2005, I tried to do something positive about it and start a charity to raise money for cancer research. And that's when I was using MySpace, PayPal, and email, and found it very challenging compared to what seemed to be very cool with YouTube and eBay. And I was like, hey, there's got to be a better way. So my two co-founders and I just naively launched a platform to democratize funding.
This is the beautiful part. Naively, and there's got to be a better way. As I said, these people didn't know there was a box in which they had to work, and when they were confronted with the box, they decided they didn't like what was going on. Shireen, you had a similar example when it came to toys and kids. Tell us a bit about your experience.
Sure. So I was inspired by Tom Hanks in the movie Big. I don't know if you guys saw that. And I'm also a gamer. It may not look like one, but I am. So when I saw that movie, it changed my life, and I wanted to be like him. And that's what I used to do. I worked on Barbie in research, tested toys, just like he did. And then I went to the other company called MGA, which you guys might know of the Bratz dolls. I started the research department there and became the brand manager for Bratz. And every single day, parents would come in and complain about how Bratz and Barbie were skanky and slutty and evil and not positive role models for their daughter. And I was like, I have the poster of the movie Big in my office. I was so inspired. I had passion. I was like gung-ho. I I totally wanted to take over the toy industry. But every single day, I didn't want to go to work anymore because every time I turn around, not even in the office, like when we did research, but like when I did research anywhere around the country, every time I turn around and somebody heard about Bratz or Barbie, they said the same thing. They're so skanky, they're so slutty, they're so evil, they're not positive role models for my daughter. And that's technically why my company was born.
And there's a sort of a mission on the side of this. It's what you do, but you are also trying to, we said I'm a gamer and I don't look like one. You're trying to create an environment for girls to do things they don't look like or that people don't think they look like, particularly in STEM.
Right, so through Playworks, which is my edtech gaming startup, interactive, our first project is focused on getting girls excited about STEM through gaming. And out of that, I was asked to host the first hackathon for the White House Council of Women and Girls in LA. And I've been doing a lot of hackathons for Mayor Garcetti, which I'm not sure. Do you guys all know what hackathons are? Yeah. Okay, good. Some people said no. All right, so have you guys seen the Social Network movie, the Facebook movie? Everybody? So I'm still hearing some no's. All right, so when they get together and they make Facebook, they're hacking, they're chugging beer, and they're doing it through a course of a couple of nights. That's a hackathon, technically. But what I do with Mayor Garcetti in LA, because I live in LA, and also with the White House, is I do hackathons for kids, and we do it usually for civic leadership or something for good in LA specifically, or with the White House directive. So out of that, parents would come and stop and ask me if I would teach their kids how to code. And I said, I have a tech startup, I don't have time for that. No. I resisted, just like maybe some of you guys heard the Olympic woman talk about resisting last night. I had the same thing for 6 months. Literally, every time I turned around, parents were like, teach my kids how to code. And I was like, no, I don't have time for that. But that's technically how Wiz Girls Academy was born, where we teach coding and entrepreneurship and healthy, balanced lifestyles. We're girl-focused and boy-inclusive. And we've had as young as 8 years old and as old as 50 plus with teacher trainings in our programs. And what we do is take the kids to SpaceX and Google. We've done basketball with Michael Jordan's basketball clinic. We teach meditation and yoga. We teach real coding, HTML and CSS, and it's project-based learning, and it's all gamified.
Anik, when I see serial entrepreneur under somebody's name like we do there, I don't know in 2015 what I'm supposed to think. Does that mean you can't hold a job? Does that mean you have authority problems? What does that, I mean, you're about 21 years old, I think, and you're a serial entrepreneur. So either you've spent 4 months at each venture, or you got some kind of age wonder potion. What is it you've done?
Yeah, so I grew up in Norman, Oklahoma.
So it was an exit strategy.
It was an exit strategy, yeah, exactly. And it's absolutely true. So, I got involved with entrepreneurship at a very young age, technically, because of, ironically, toys and coding. When I was a little kid, Legos were always my favorite toys. And my parents are professors, and on days off from school, I didn't have nannies and babysitters and stuff, so I'd just go hang out in my dad's office. And he's a chemist, so it's glassware and beakers and chemicals and no place for a 6-year-old to run around, or his computer. And growing up, I was just always playing games on his computer, and also not the best thing to be doing at his workplace. And so filled up his hard drive with games that I was downloading, and one day he challenged me to actually sit down and build him a website. And I didn't know that it was something that was unreasonable for a 6-year-old to do, but taught myself HTML and made a really basic website for him. And that sort of led me on this path of just creating things. And I think that entrepreneurship has always been this intersection of creativity and curiosity. Not much different than writing a book or playing an instrument or making a painting or something. That's my outlet for creativity. And so when I got to college, I was an undergrad at Cornell, I started going to class and realizing that that wasn't necessarily the most fun thing in the world for me to be doing, and started writing code on the side for fun, and ended up accidentally building a company with my roommate. And then we sold our first business when we were undergrads, and that led to this cascade of dropping out of school and starting other businesses. So some of the time lost is accounted for there, probably.
That helps.
Yeah.
Now the math all makes sense. All right. A linear explanation in a digital world. Fareed, this I was saving you for last because yours is a somewhat different situation. There's some remarkable similarities. You saw a problem that needed to be solved, but you are working in Azerbaijan in an infrastructure that I would imagine is a little less developed than your colleagues on the panel have been using for solving a problem. The problem you were solving for was electronic payments.
Yes.
Tell me your story.
The story is basically I'm a graduate from San Jose State, California, and at 2007, when I was 23, I went back to Azerbaijan just to visit parents and friends, and I saw the way people were using internet there was mainly for social network and no e-commerce at all, no payments at all, just like maybe some chatting and dating and things like that, and reading news.
It's not so wrong, chatting and dating.
No, but that was the...
Not so lucrative, though.
Yes, that's what was mainly used for. So I started a company called Golden Pay. Actually, Golden is dedicated to California, the Golden State, so Golden. So I created that company, Golden Pay, and we launched enabled online payments in Azerbaijan. And in a couple of years, in many websites, you will see that people start to purchase services or products, and they would pay through Golden Pay. And
this was for people, anybody? Was it business to business, or anybody could?
Anybody. I mean, we have quite good penetration of bank cards, or debit cards, or credit cards, but they were mainly used to get the cash from ATM or payment at the post terminals in real life. Nothing really was happening online. So when we launched that, and past 5 years now, we've been like double, triple, like growing, and I realized that now this kind of model can be done in other countries as well. So right now we're looking at neighboring country called Georgia. It's not a state Georgia, it's a country Georgia, and Bosnia-Herzegovina. And I'm actually flying from here to Dominican Republic also. Maybe we'll see opportunity over there. So we'd like to transfer our product that it can be implemented in many countries in a very fast way. And maybe we can do it in many developing countries.
Did you have some experience? Because you're getting into a world, your world, like Slava's world, is a highly regulated world, or at least a world in which there's somebody who must have told you at some point, you can't do this, or you can't do this without the necessary approvals. And
well, the way it worked in Azerbaijan is we did not have any licensing or any kind of laws around it, actually. But Azerbaijan laws say that unless it is illegal, everything is legal in a way. We did this, we built it all. And then when central bank came like, hey, what you've been doing, we need to license all this, I said, can I be part of the committee for developing the law? So actually I became part of because we were so big that they couldn't, just eliminate us. So I'm part of the committee there that actually created the law around online payments and electronic payments. So it's good now.
that's actually very interesting. Old is new. Slava, I'm not sure about you. Shireen, you have been involved with the government and going in directions that you want to go in policy discussions, right? The White House has involved you and stuff. Slava, you have as well?
Yeah, quite a bit, especially with the Jobs Act. And just to back up, there was a Jobs Act which got passed in 2012, and you can't take full credit for it, but there was a campaign on Indiegogo which was called the crowdfunding campaign to change the crowdfunding law. And that was to raise money to get the lawyers to petition to Congress. That was then sent to Congress. Then they created the Jobs Act. But yeah, as part of the Jobs Act, they've been trying to figure out how to do Title II, Title III, and all these other different things. And we've regularly gone to the White House and other different discussions with the SEC, and it's definitely a tricky balancing act.
Well, this room and this panel will remind us all that entrepreneurship exists on every level. It's not all technology and internet. So tell people who don't know, I've used Indiegogo for things. I've not ever been the person recruiting money, but I've made payments and I've given things. What's the difference in Indiegogo and Kickstarter?
Yeah, so we started Indiegogo in January 2008, and now we actually have over 1,500 competitors. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, usually they slice it up by country, by category, or by business model. We're the largest in the world, and there's 3 things that differentiate us versus any company. Okay. So number 1, we're completely open, where anybody can raise money for absolutely any idea without any judgment or application. That might sound like a novel, simple concept, but actually it's very complicated. There's not many YouTubes, there's not many eBays, there's not many Googles out there, or Azerbaijan. right? Always open unless it's not open to it. It's very complicated to do that. Number two, we're completely data-driven. You can't buy me a beer or use my email, which is Slava at Indiegogo, to try to get on our homepage and in our newsletter. It's exactly the same thing as Google PageRank, which everything is data-oriented and everything is algorithmic. So also very complicated and very unique in the industry. And third is our commitment to love, which is we take out of the chapter of Amazon and Zappos, and we believe that the customer deserves to have tons of attention and to have a wonderful experience. And that's whether it's on the campaign owner side or on the funder side. And again, that's quite a challenge to do at scale when you're sending money to 70 to 100 countries a week and you have 10,000 of those at any minute.
Shireen, let me ask you, you went from a job where you were employed at a company into this venture. What did you not expect when you made this decision after not being an entrepreneur to be one?
That's a great question, but I got to tell you, when I got my job at Mattel originally, I called my boss for an informational interview, and I bugged him for 9 months, went to the toy fair on my own, walked in the first day with a card. It was a business card that I had, which had my resume link on it. And I walked into his office, and he's like, "What is this? Are you an entrepreneur?" And this was 99, way back in the day. And I looked at him and I was like, wow, I didn't think about that, but I am, right? And that started way before I even thought about really being an entrepreneur. And then when I went to MGA and I started the research department and was a brand manager for Bratz, I got live MBA school there for 5 years. I helped the brand evolve into an entertainment franchise. So I think I got my literally live MBA school there. So starting this was relatively easier than if I wanted to leave Mattel. And
so it was a progression, a natural progression, an evolution.
Absolutely.
It didn't seem like a switch for you.
Yeah.
Anik, you don't have any other experience. In other words, you don't know what it's like to be a working stiff who gets a check.
Yeah, I've never had a resume. Yeah.
There's nothing to link to. Your resume link is empty.
Yeah, exactly.
You are the child of parents from elsewhere?
Yeah.
Any problems with that? I mean, did your parents ever sit and ask you whether you're planning on getting a job?
Yeah, so my parents are both in academia, immigrant family. My mother was originally from India, my dad's from Bangladesh. They've been actually incredibly supportive throughout. It took a bit of education to get them over the hump of letting me take off from school, but I think that they've actually been incredibly supportive through and through, and I wouldn't be where I am without them at all. And I think that growing up, just putting myself in uncomfortable situations like learning how to code or, playing with the stock market at a young age were all situations that my parents really put me in.
They supported, they encouraged.
Yeah.
So if people out here have kids who they either want to nurture down this path or who show these kinds of inclinations, what kind of support, what would you offer? What would you tell parents of kids or kids who seem to have this entrepreneurial gene in a world, in a country where that's not exactly what our school system is built for? That's not, that's sort of behavior that's outside of the norm a little bit. It doesn't stick to the curriculum. How do you reconcile that? How do you still stay a good student and stay in school and at the same time pursue some of these passions that could change the world?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the world has also definitely changed a lot in the last 20 years. There's platforms like Indiegogo where you can make your ideas happen. There's so many more educational resources and things that Shireen's working on, for example. I think that the number of resources out there to learn how to code or learn how to take up any sort of creative art or make those projects come to life, there's actually no excuse to not be able to go do things these days. And I'd say that one of the things that I tried to take on from a very, very young age was not necessarily even the task of learning something through some sort of structure, but actually the task of teaching yourself how to learn something. So going through that process of autodidacticism. And I think that there's, with YouTube and a million other things now, you don't need a textbook. You don't need to buy the books to go do it. You can just learn it.
Shireen, were you fully encouraged? I mean, I don't mean from your parents, but I mean, are we in an environment that was supportive of you making the decisions you've made to go down this road?
That's a great question. Originally, no. I got a lot of resistance. And I was like, I'm the kind of person that's where's the back door? Literally, when the whole thing with Mattel started, like I sent my resume to Mattel a million times. Nobody called, nobody cared. But I had to basically seek out my boss. And the same thing with this. It's like I wanted to seek out what I wanted to do. And literally I was getting the messages every single day from the parents. It's a big need. And I was like, when there's a big need, I'm going to do something to make a difference.
Harder or easier for you being a woman?
That's a great question. Honestly, I think it's really easy, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. I know there's a lot of stuff out there that talks about women in tech and gaming and all that stuff that's a little bit out there and a little crazy. I'm not falling into that fire. I'm not getting into that.
Farid, let me ask you this. It's great to talk to you now and the successes that you're having and seeing where else you're going. Were there moments where you were thinking this is stupid?
Not stupid, but there were moments when I saw several times deep down, like process. I mean, the point where I could have given up several times. There were issues with finances. There were times when we couldn't pay salaries for months, but you should have motivated the employees, stay with the company, believe in the idea. We had, I mean, it was tough times, but I mean, in the end of the day, if you didn't give up, and I'll tell you one thing, like, I mean, things didn't go according to the plan, and there's a saying that says that when if things go according to the plan, there's something wrong with your plan. So it was kind of, expected in a way. It might be frustrated at certain points, but I mean, and I'll tell you something. I don't think it's all over. I mean, like the problems are out there still. It's a different maybe situation. Maybe we don't have financial problems anymore, but you might have some other types of problems. So it's normal, and I expect it. And I think for the next couple of years, I mean, it will always continue. So there will be competition. I mean, as Slava said, we have now 7 more internet payment companies in Azerbaijan. Just a few.
And it wasn't even obvious to you that there was demand for it at the beginning. You just thought.
Everybody called me crazy when I wanted to start it, and everybody said nobody will use it, nobody will put their credit card information online. Are you crazy? I mean, like, this is not going to be possible. Market is too small. Blah blah blah. And now we're having 7 of them.
Slava, I saw something you wrote where you talk about. You actually make references to a business plan, but you talk about. How big you should plan to be. I mean, now that you're big, this is the issue. Where do you all stop? Where do you all know where do you set your goal, and then you get above that goal? Where do you set your next goal?
I mean, people sometimes ask me for advice, and I keep it really simple. I say, think really big, start really small, and iterate very quickly. And I think, think really big has to be beyond reach.
Beyond reach.
Like, we want literally to democratize the world of funding, and whether it's the moon is the new geography or Bitcoin becomes a new currency, we'd like to be around 100 years from now, and we believe that democratizing capital will not be finished in 100 years. It'll still need to have its efficiencies happening. But just to change that a little bit, a question which is, I believe being an entrepreneur is like the movie Inception, right? Mm-hmm. So a decent amount of you hopefully have seen the movie Inception. Okay, I'm not going to ask you if everybody.
I really hope you guys are moviegoers,
right?
Because basically you're not going to pass the quiz at this point.
Well, just watch, which is in Inception, the movie, there's the real world, then there's the dream world, and then there's the meta dream world. So let's ignore the meta dream world for a second. The difference between the real world and the dream world is just that there's gravity in the real world and that you see the top fall, okay? In case you didn't understand that, that's the whole point of the movie. All right. So,
I've seen it twice and I didn't understand it.
So I believe being an entrepreneur is the same exact thing. You have the real world, which is the reality we live in right now, unless you're in some metaphysical world that you're in an abstraction. But you live in the real world right now. And then there's the dream world, which is the entrepreneur's mind. See, in the entrepreneur's mind, the dream world has all happened, which is in their mind reality. Everything has already been happening, and the future has already unfolded in our minds. See, if I ask any of them, I'm pretty sure they have this all figured out in their minds. They already see it all unfolding, where it's going, what are going to be the challenges, but there is no gravity in their minds, so they're not held back. See, the challenge is to take your dream world into the real world. And that's where people call people crazy, because sometimes when you have to jump over those limitations of the resources that you have, the language you have, and the other things which are called gravity, if you don't do it so well, they call you crazy because you obviously are not a good entrepreneur. And when you do it well, they call you a good entrepreneur. See, in my opinion, anybody who's an entrepreneur, and it doesn't matter if you actually are an entrepreneur, it's just like Rob said, entrepreneurial, you've already had it become reality in your mind. You just need to then transition your mind into the real world. And then all of a sudden, people will say, oh, wow.
So I want to examine this for a minute. That's very good. Thank you. But what it does is it sets up for the panel that I'd like Robert to have me do next year. Because the thing is, we've got the four of you who are at relative levels of success in what you do. And you've all had some version of not everybody thinking this was the right track. Crazy, why don't you do something else, resistance, that kind of thing. And as a business journalist, I hear from a lot of entrepreneurs, and you've all met them, and they come and see you, and they come and see so many of you. And some people are so driven, and they've got these ideas, and they're seeing the future, and gravity doesn't exist. But some of the ideas do seem a little bat crazy. And so the panel I'd like to do next is those that didn't make it. At some point, you said something that stuck out. I'm going to have you answer it last, because I'm going to start with you, Nick, because you're a serial entrepreneur. You've done this before, which means you've iterated. You said, what'd you say? Iterate?
Iterate quickly.
Iterate quickly. At what point do you say, my God, this is my passion. I built something around this. This is what I want to do. I think all bowling balls should be square. And after people keep on telling you, you can't have a square bowling ball, at what point do you change and yet keep your passion? At what point do you say, maybe I've been going down a road that's not all that smart?
Yeah, so the story with my current company, Moat, is we're an online advertising analytics company. And the vision behind it is there's tons of money in advertising. There's tons of ads that you see on the internet. All of them are terrible for the most part. Like, name the last time you can remember an ad that you saw the other day. So we realized that there's basically a couple of reasons why advertising is terrible on the web. One is creative. You think back to your childhood, there's probably iconic television commercials that you remember growing up. There's no such thing as like an iconic banner ad. They're like little squares and rectangles. And so what we did is we started going to big marketers, went to Bank of America and Kellogg's and guys like that and said, your ads suck. And they're like, yes, we know, make us better ones. And then so we hired designers to try to make better ones. And then we realized it's an incredibly subjective conversation because the reason is the way that advertising is measured is broken. Traditionally, the way that advertising is measured on the web is based off of click-through rate. The problem is nobody clicks on ads. Average click-through rate on a banner is 0.03%. That means 3 clicks out of every 10,000 impressions. And if you factor in that many of those are accidental, some of them are fraudulent, that number becomes basically 0. And so what we started doing then was realizing creative is a really, really hard business. It's subjective. It requires a lot of people. Let's figure out how to measure success better for brands. And so what we did is we created an analytics company that measures things like, very simple things, like was the ad actually in the user's browser? Did the user scroll down? Did they move their mouse over it? Did they interact with it? We can generate heat maps that show what users did with the ad and do it all in a very privacy-friendly way. So we're not collecting any personally identifiable information on the user. We're just getting aggregate, anonymized inputs around whether or not the creative worked. And so that's an example of how we sort of started down one path and started going down a completely different path. And it turns out that that business is far more scalable. We're working with thousands of marketers and publishers and measuring trillions of ads all over the world.
Shireen, do you have an experience where you've had to make a significant shift from what you believed?
Well, I think this whole coding, entrepreneurship, the programs that we do, because I started purely gaming, and that's where my passion really lies. But out of parents really hounding me for this, and every time I turned around, it was like something they wanted. I was like, the biggest thing I learned at MGA was there was on every door, like, the consumer is king, like, #1, and then #2, seed #1. Like, and that's, you got to give people what they want and what they need. And that's one thing that entrepreneurs really need to listen to, and it's really important. So I think, like, with the shift of, like, technically concurrently having 2 companies at the same time and working on the gaming side and the coding side, although we use the games and everything, it's connected. Mm-hmm. It's definitely connected. And I think it's just because there's so much like opportunity in the digital space right now, and there's so much access.
Slava, you described that journey. I think you laid it out very well, but even your own company's journey where people wouldn't fund a project and then it goes on Indiegogo and it's funded at many times what the people wanted. So in other words, things are surprising you on an ongoing basis. What are the biggest ones from when you started this to now? What's the stuff that you not only couldn't have guessed, but is completely 180 degrees from what you would have thought?
I mean, I don't think anything is actually 180 degrees. I mean, when we came up with the idea in 2006, it was to create an open marketplace where anybody can fund any idea. So at a vision level, we want to create a platform that would then have creativity stack on top of it. Would we know what the creativity was? Absolutely not. So would I think that actually a few years ago, we would have the first ever crowdfunded baby on our site? And yes, that's exactly what I said, which is a couple got turned down by all the insurance companies and all the hospitals because their probability in their 20s was too low to actually have a child, that they all got rejected. All of them rejected them. They went out to Indiegogo, put up that personal story, and they actually got the full money that they needed for in vitro. So that's cute, but they're not going to be able to get a baby. But actually then they did get pregnant and they had the baby and they named it Indiegogo. That's
Wow.
The Indiegogo part is not true. But the story is true. The Indiegogo part, naming it, is
That
not
was
true.
so good.
But,
You see what happens? You get so riveted
Yeah.
to the conversation. It's like, oh
But
my
I mean-
God, they named it. If I, because I get a little distracted, I would have walked out texting my wife, you can't believe this.
I mean, when you see solo roadways, right, get funded, and probably within the next 5-10 years, people are going to be driving on a small segment of this in a small area of America. Obviously, it's not going to be throughout the entire country. I mean, that got funded on Indiegogo, and I'm going to guess that 50 years from now, it's going to be normal. I mean, 50 years is far, but it's not really that far. It's like you need to play hockey where the puck is going, not where it is, right? Or when you see the Turkish Revolution, where all of a sudden there's all these problems in Turkey, and they're having like their riots a couple of years ago, and then all of a sudden, because they're actually stopping, the government is stopping the media from being able to cover any of this, and they completely close it, and it's like, oh, well, that's over there. But then all of a sudden, 3 people from the Turkish diaspora from around the world, one from New York and 2 other countries, so meaning New York is not a country actually, but meaning from America and 2 other countries, they started an Indiegogo campaign to be able to raise enough money to buy an ad in the New York Times, to be able to talk about what is going on in Turkey. So what happens is those 3 people get thousands of people to raise enough money, which if you need a discounted price of an ad in the New York Times, it's about $52,000. If you get a discounted rate for a full-page ad, they got the $52,000 in one day. They doubled it in the second day. The third day, they were already getting the crowd to give them the feedback. The 4th day, they locked it down. The 5th day, Friday, the riots were happening on the weekend. Friday, there was the ad in the New York Times, which then what happened? The perfect thing. Every media outlet around the world wanted to talk to these people about this ad and why they did it and what happened, which is exactly what the Turkish government didn't want to have talk about. So it literally was changing the world. So when we thought about let's create Indiegogo, where we're like, there's going to be a Turkish riot and there's going to be an ad and there's going to be a baby, absolutely not, right? Absolutely not. But if you create a platform, and this is key, that is open, you'll always be surprised what can happen.
Let me ask you, you studied here in the United States, so you were very familiar. I think it's more obvious to people who are not from the U.S., this environment of entrepreneurship, this environment in which you can invent and raise money and do all of these things. Is it very different in Azerbaijan? Or are there people like you and like Slava and like Shireen and like Anik exactly the same way in Azerbaijan or everywhere else you've been?
Not really. I mean, your country and your culture, and although you can criticize your education system also, actually it's much more open than in many countries you can see abroad. We won't have many people coming out from school or like have crazy ideas or things that they want to do to change the world or change at least the country or the system. So that's not really the case. And I think my education here And also my extracurricular activities. I was part of student organization called ISAC when I was actually studying here. Also, this kind of activities helped me a lot. I mean, practically and theoretically learned things that gave me that courage and to do the things that I've done in Baku.
Should business schools teach, or schools in general, should they teach entrepreneurship?
I mean, I think you can teach it to a certain level, but the rest is, I don't know, when I'm thinking of like entrepreneurship, it is mostly about, you know, taking the risk, not giving up, and I mean, motivating and showing leadership in the right time, in the right way. So, I mean, it might be tough to learn it from the books, or, I mean, it is mostly with the interaction, with a lot of practical stuff you do. So yeah, in a way, it should, but you don't expect, like, if you have entrepreneurship faculty and everybody coming out from that faculty ends up doing what Steve Jobs did. So
right. What do you think, Annie? Can you learn? Can you teach? Should they teach entrepreneurship, or do you have to learn this on your own?
Yeah, so going back to the French word that was on the screen earlier, the word entrepreneurship, the root from what I understand is a French word that means to undertake. And I think that generally speaking, it's not something that you learn by reading a book or watching a movie or however people consume knowledge these days. I think it's really something you have to just go out and do. And it sounds oversimplified, but I think that doing it is also not a task that you do by yourself. One of the most important lessons and critical skills that you have to develop in becoming an entrepreneur, I think, is constructing a team, finding people to work with you and create a shared vision around. And ideally, those are people that are way smarter than you. You know, I'm just thinking back through all the companies that I've been involved with and all the companies I've invested in. It's always visionary, really intelligent people that are bouncing off each other and creating this interplay that leads to, you know, iterations, that leads to growth, that leads to new ideas. And I mean, I think that Slava's platform is an example of, you know, just a collection of tons of people that are going out and doing that. But we live in a world where there's an abundance of ideas. There's people that are copying ideas left and right as well. But being able to actually execute something and do it well, I think is a human constraint. It's a human resources constraint in a lot of cases.
Shireen, your view on that? Can you teach this?
So I didn't go to MBA school. Like I said, I learned it live. So I feel like there's elements of both, and that's what we teach the kids in our programs too. It's like you have to tell them, they have to be aware of what's happening in the world, because I work mostly with inner city kids and they have no clue. Like on the first day we asked them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I've heard so many like African-American 11-year-old girls specifically, and boys, say they want to be POs. And I'm like, PO, is that a police officer? No, probation officer. And I'm like, do you know that we live in a digital age? Like, these are smartphones, you could be a coder, you can start your own company. You know, I got these kids signed up for TechCrunch and Pandu Daily, all of the like big tech news outlets. They have to do presentations of the tech news of the day, because they're learning how to be an entrepreneur, like giving them snippets of like real world entrepreneurship.
So in your world, just the exposure, the hands-on
I feel like the
experience,
hands-on
is
awareness, I mean,
useful.
going to school is awesome, and don't get me wrong, I think it's like always learning is important, but I think they really need to have the seeds planted for them, especially in the inner cities.
Yeah, this is a pet passion of mine. I think when we're children, like let's say 5 years old, anything is possible. We're willing to take any risk, any creativity. The world is boundless. There are no limitations. And actually, it is our school system that as you go through it, all of that willingness to take risk, the willingness to fail, actually not only gets supported, but gets beat right out of you. Beat right out of you through grade school, through high school, and then through college. So by the time you graduate college, the only skills you have is to become one of the normal jobs, which is you need to become a lawyer, a doctor, a teacher, or whatever. And by the time you graduate college, they're like, well, are you going to become an entrepreneur? Well, of course not. That's very risky and that's very scary because you haven't practiced it. And if you ask, you know, anybody, we teach the normal curriculum, which is the reading, the writing, arithmetic. Yet if you study math, no one expects you to have to become Einstein. Or if you study English or how to write something, no one says, well, you better become Shakespeare. But so for some reason, people talk about entrepreneurship. Well, if you're going to study entrepreneurship, you're going to have to become an entrepreneur. And I loved the way Rob even started because he used the word entrepreneurial. See, to me, it should be something that is taught in the school system to understand how to be entrepreneurial. Because just because you study entrepreneurship, which I don't think should be called entrepreneurship because it got a bad word because people are like, we don't need more entrepreneurs, or I don't want to be an entrepreneur, we need to teach failure. Everybody should be willing to understand and practice failure. Just how we practice English, we learned how to spell, then we made a word, then we made a sentence, then we made a paragraph, then we made an essay, and then we wrote a book. But all of a sudden you graduate college, it's like, well, you're going to become an entrepreneur? That's like writing a book without ever knowing how to spell. It's kind of scary. So I actually do believe that starting in 7th grade, there should be 10 years of failure school, not entrepreneurship school, and you should go from 7th to 8th, and then high school, and then college. There should be a dashboard which follows you from each grade because you'll learn from your failure that the dashboard will share with the other professors or teachers to be able to keep on working on those things. By the time you fail 10 times, failing an 11th time in the real world won't be a big deal.
I'd have had a 4.0 in failure school. Anik, Shireen, Slava, and Farid, you guys are so inspirational. We wish you the greatest of success, and thank you for sharing some of your experiences and your ideas with us. We will carry them with us for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Good job.
So, Ali, you are 110% invited to be with us again next year in 2016.
Real pleasure.
Let's start planning the panel.
Very good.
Anik, you mentioned something about visionary, intelligent people. You mentioned something about all four of you. That was great. I always learn something new at all of these panels. Shireen, I learned that Barbie is skanky on this panel. And that's the benefit of a lot of market research, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I didn't say it, they did. I'm just repeating it.
I have to tell you, especially your nonprofit effort resonates with me. Ada, my wife, who's back there, and I have two daughters, 4 and 5 years old. And Jolie came home one day, and I said, we're sitting at the kitchen island, and I said, Jolie, how was school today? And she said, oh, school was great. I said, wow, what did you do? And who knew what she did? And she said, you know what? I love math.
Wow.
And I said, remember that in 10 years. But I started crying a little bit, and she had to ask me why Daddy was crying. Aww. And we need to see more of that. The seeds planted. Who said something about Shireen planting seeds? We have to plant seeds. The 7th grade failure class. Maybe we could come up with better wording for that. But I like the thought. Craig Kielberger is planting a lot of seeds. Shireen, your program is planting a lot of seeds, and we're really thankful for that. Anik, Legos, my favorite toy as a kid, and my daughter's favorite toy as kids too. Talk about a franchise and talk about opening up opportunities. You know, when you said that you made a web page when you were 6, I'm going home and asking Jolie to get online and figure out how to make me a web page. You said today, and this is what I'm going to tell her, Anik said there's no excuse to not do things. You're absolutely right, and it's no excuse because of the people on the stage, especially my friend Slava Rubin. I met Slava Rubin years ago. He was actually at the very first Kin Global. So Slava is a Kinian, and we take full credit for everything you've accomplished since then. Farid and I met in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, at an economist conference for which we were both speaking. And I had never heard about Golden Pay or knew much about Farid before showing up. I read his bio. I heard him speak, and I said, I got to get this guy to Chicago, because he's doing some exciting stuff. I learned here today that you just do whatever's not illegal, which is a pretty interesting life.
And then he gets on the committee for the
That's
things
right, and then he figures out how to make it legal. But you also said something else about not being able to pay salaries for a few months. You know, a great entrepreneur once told me, and I've experienced this a little bit myself, you never really understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur until you've made payrolls from your own pocket. And that's when it becomes clear and present. And I will add that one of your new missions, which you told me about before attending, is to help people in Baku and Azerbaijan enter this entrepreneurial economy, to have access to coding and building businesses and the regulatory environment, all these things, and you're taking that on right now. And you provide a bridge to our next segment, which is about the meta entrepreneur. You'll learn about that in a few minutes. Slava, you said something about envisioning what is beyond reach, and somehow you've made things within reach for literally millions of people, doing the things that, enabling us to do the things that people could only have dreamt about in the dream world before, and bringing them into this context of gravity. That's beautiful. Ali, when you left CNN, you said it felt weird. You said it was uncomfortable. Well, that's part of the test to determine any plan that is 100% accurate. You got the wrong plan. And so now you've struck into the world to take new directions, and we love you for that, and we're glad you're here with us. But I would illustrate that often comfort is an enemy of greatness. It's fine to determine when I'm happy, when I'm comfortable, when I've attained what I want to attain. There's a zen to that. But the question you have to decide as a human being is, when is the zen, or when is it preventing you from seeing the visions that you've created in your mind, and when is it holding us back? Thank you very much to this panel. It's really fantastic. Thank you. Thank you.